Hola y bienvenidos a Sex and Spanglish, where we empower mujeres to get in touch with their bodies, own their pleasure, and where we discuss all the cochinadas our abuelas didn't tell us about. I'm Ana Lopez, sexpert, future doctora, certified sex and life coach, proud Latina, and your go-to guide for all things sex. I'm here to help you kick vergüenza to the curb and teach you to have guilt-free sexual pleasure. Basically, I'm here to help you have mind-blowing sex without all the guilt and shame you learned growing up. Let's be real. La comunidad latina doesn't talk about sex, pero que suerte tienes because this Latina does. It is my vision to have Latinas worldwide discussing sex with one another just like they do with chisme. Así que, prepárate. I'm about to change the way you view sex para siempre. Welcome back to another episode of the Sex and Spanglish podcast. Today's episode is going to be another episode in the childhood series. So for those of you that are new here, I recently started a series where I'm talking about the nuances in childhood. So like how we were raised, what we are taught, and how those things actually impact our adult lives and then in turn our sex lives. So we're not talking about sexual assault. We are not talking about trauma, things like that, like toxic relationships, divorce, what have you. We are talking about the nuanced things that we don't really think about or necessarily associate with sex. So today, we are going to be talking about communication. Now, I know there are like scientific, I guess is the word, or proper names for many of these things, but I'm just going to call them what I call them because it's layman's terms. And honestly, in my opinion, it doesn't fucking matter what it's called. If you were impacted by it, you were impacted by it, right? So who gives a shit what the name is? So anyways, today I'm going to be talking about 3 different ways that we can and do experience communication and how that impacts our adult lives and, of course, our sex lives. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is the don't make mom or dad mad. Now, I can almost guarantee you that there is like a proper name for this. And again, I don't care, right? Like, if you learned don't make mom or dad mad, that is more important than knowing the actual name to this. So, if you learned as a child not to make mom or dad mad for fear of getting in trouble, for fear of getting yelled at, for fear of getting spanked, what have you, that is impacting your adult life right now and your sex life. So this just doesn't have to be mom or dad, right? It can be like older sibling. It can be tía, tío, abuela, abuelo. It could be whoever was watching you, maybe like a babysitter or something, right? Doesn't matter. Don't make this, elder person mad, right? So oftentimes what happens when you get that messaging, whether like verbally or you just kind of pick it up like, oh shit, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm always getting in trouble. So I'll try not to do these things to make them mad, right? It becomes this almost like this game of like, let's not make this person mad. What happens is you eventually stop expressing how you feel and you stop expressing your wants and needs. So for example, this can look like, I'm not going to show that I'm upset because when I'm upset, then my parent gets upset and then I get in trouble. So I will just kind of stifle my emotions, right? I'm just going to push them down. I'm going to act like I don't have them. Another way that this shows up is like you're noticing maybe your shoes are getting too small for you, right? Like it's more obvious when it's like pants or shirts, like, your parents kind of notice those things, but when it comes to like something like shoes, they may not necessarily notice that your shoes are getting too small for you. And so you're like, oh, I think I need new shoes, but I don't want to tell my mom or dad because usually when I tell them I need something, they get mad and I don't want to make them mad. So then I just don't tell them. So this is kind of bad in and of itself, right? To have this experience. This can also lead to resentment, which no one wants to feel resentment, right? But how does this relate to sex? Well, if you aren't acostumbrada, if you aren't used to or comfortable expressing your feelings, your wants, your needs, your desires, it's not going to be comfortable doing that during sex or in regards to sex, right? Like if you can't do it in your everyday life, you're sure as hell not going to be able to do it in the bedroom, right? So no wonder you don't tell your partner, hey, you know what? I really don't like that thing that you've been doing for the past 5 years, right? Because you're afraid, like a part of you is afraid that if you say something, then they may get mad or they may get upset, right? It's this learned kind of behavior that you've brought from childhood. And oftentimes, my clients will say, like, well, I know that my partner isn't going to get mad. Like, they would be more than happy to like not do that thing if they knew that it was uncomfortable or they knew that I didn't like it. But there's still a part of you that thinks that they might get upset, right? So you're kind of battling between like your logical brain, which is like, no, they're not going to get upset. And this other part of your brain that you kind of carried from childhood, right? That's like, hey, it's like this little like whisper in the back of your brain, like, hey, we might get in trouble, right? And so you're going back and forth in your brain about it. And usually the little voice wins. So you don't say what you want, you don't say what you need, you don't say how you feel, right? You oftentimes just go with the flow, kind of whatever they want, and you avoid expressing your desires, things like that. So the second, we're going to call it lo que vaya a pensar la gente. The second type of communication, lo que vaya a pensar la gente. This is like one of the most common dichos that I have personally ever heard, like, ¿qué vaya a pensar la gente? What are people going to say? What are they going to think? Right? Like, my reaction to that was like, who the fuck cares? But I still heard it growing up. And so I don't think that this is necessarily a communication style per se, but I think that it stifles communication. And so I think it's important to talk about, and which is why I'm adding it to this episode, right? You're afraid to do what you want or afraid to be who you actually are, or kind of even to explore that, right? Because you're too busy living for other people and doing what you quote unquote should do, right? And usually what you should do is what other people say that you should be doing, right? So this can happen a lot when you hear often from your parents or your, guardians, adults around you growing up, like, oh, que va a pensar la gente, right? So you kind of live in secrecy. You don't share a lot of things. You're afraid to do certain things because you've been told this over and over and over, even though it doesn't quite make sense to you, right? You might develop this belief and be like, oh shit, like what are people going to think, right? And so you're constantly worried about what other people are thinking versus what you are thinking. So in bed, and when I say in bed, I realize that I say this all the time. When I say in bed, I mean like having sex. I just say in bed just because I don't know why I say it. But anyways, in bed, when you're having sex, this shows up in like you not bringing up what you want. Like you have an idea of something that you want to try or something you want to do, and you don't say anything. Because what are they going to think? What if they think it's weird? What if they don't like it? All this and that and the other, right? And you start like catastrophizing what's going to happen. Oftentimes this also shows up, I see this mainly with women, and this could just be because I work with female clients, but who knows? But I see it show up as in like not wanting to show off your body, not wanting to express yourself as in like moans or grunts or things that kind of like just naturally come out of you, like you stifle those noises and things like that because you're like, oh, what are they going to think, right? Or this often happens with facial expressions during sex, like, oh, like you're so busy thinking about your face because you're also concerned about what if I make a certain face and then they think that I don't like what they're doing. And it's like this whole catastrophizing thing again, right? So you're constantly in other people's brain versus in your brain, which is the most important thing to be in, right? We're always stuck in other people's brain. And this often leads to, like, this definitely applies to sex, just like everything on this podcast, but in life in general, right? If you're always stuck in somebody else's brain, you don't know what you want or what you like because you've never asked yourself. You've never given yourself the opportunity to study yourself. So no wonder you don't fucking know what you want. And this can play into like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to do what they want because I don't know what I want anyways. But then wondering why you're not satisfied in the bedroom. So the third type of communication style that I want to talk about isn't even really a communication style per se. It is more so how you learn to communicate, and then how that then, we're going to talk about how that then impacts your adult life and your sex life. And so it is older siblings as parental figures. And you're probably like, what the fuck does that have to do with communication? But hear me out. When you are an older sibling and you are, put as the parental figure, the way that you learn to communicate is different than those children who do not have to take on that role. It is very stressful, and there's a lot of pressure for adults to have and raise children. So imagine a child that does not have a fully developed brain taking care of one or more children on their own as a child, right? So it's like a child taking care of a child. I don't care if they're a teenager or not. It is stressful and it puts pressure on them. And so this can become problematic because what you're used to in childhood, you're going to take that into adulthood. So if you are acostumbrada to be the nurturer, to be the one that's taking care of everybody, right? You fall into this habit of doing so as a child out of necessity. And then when you become an adult, it's not like this light switch flips and you're like not doing that anymore, right? It can be a hard habit to break, and you might not even recognize that you're doing it. Or what also happens is that you just assume that that's how you are, right? That this is part of your identity. But I'm here to tell you that that's not necessarily true, right? It's just a habit that you've developed. And you can break free of that habit. But why I think this can be very problematic for folks is because they're becoming acostumbrada to take care of other people, right? But in that, they're not learning to take care of themselves. They kind of have to leave themselves to the side because they're pressured to keep these other people alive, right? To nurture these people, to make sure they have what they need. And so how this shows up in sex is that you are constantly worried that your partner or partners are taken care of. Do they have what they need? Do they have what they want? Are they okay? Are they liking it, right? And it's totally fine and normal to want your partner to enjoy themselves when you're having sex, right? I'm not saying that's wrong, but when that is all you are thinking about, that is when there is a problem. I've said this time and time again, and I will continue saying it until the day that I die, that we are all responsible for our own pleasure, which means the partner that you're worried about, if they're enjoying themselves or not, that is not your responsibility. You need to focus on your pleasure if you want your partner to enjoy themselves. Because if you are having a good time, it is more likely that your partner is also going to have a good time. So focus on your pleasure. So there are 3 communication styles that we talked about today. Older siblings as parental figures, que vaya pensar la gente, and don't make mom and dad or other parental figure mad, right? And so you're probably like, okay, cool. Now I know, like, I've been getting so many messages from y'all about like, okay, great. Now one more thing that my parents like fucked me over and like all these things, right? And again, this isn't about blaming your parents or your grandparents or whoever raised you, right? It's not about feeling resentment and like they fucked me up and I want to do better as a parent. Like, it's not about any of that. It's just about bringing awareness to where, where these things are showing up in your life as an adult. Because again, we've taken everything from childhood and brought it to adulthood. We didn't leave it behind. It's still there inside of us somewhere. So this is just about bringing awareness. So over the next few weeks, I really want you to start paying attention to, first, I want you to recall the communication style, the ways in which your households communicated, and maybe even your family. Maybe it wasn't like just your household. So like, yes, definitely think about your household, like where you lived, but also think about your family, like who you were in communication with often. How did they communicate? What did that look like? What did you like? What did you don't like? How did you react, right? Think of all of that and then begin to notice how you communicate now, how those communication styles may be impacting you hoy en día, right? Like today, how is it maybe impacting your sex life, right? Try to make those associations on your own. It all starts with awareness. So don't worry about like trying to quote unquote fix it yet. We just want to create this awareness, because with awareness, if we know that there is something that's not working, we can then work to fix it. 1. 2, it also brings compassion. If you have more understanding of why you might be doing the things that you are doing or not doing the things that you are not doing, you can have more compassion for yourself, for your partner, for your parents, what have you, right? So it all starts with awareness. If you are ready to take this work deeper, La Sinvergüenza Symposium is for you. So we are currently closed for enrollment, but there is a wait list. So go to the show notes of this episode, click on Get on the Wait List, and get yourself on the wait list. I'm going to be reaching out to the folks that are on the wait list first when enrollment does open again. So you're definitely going to want to get on the wait list if this is something that you're interested in. We are currently 3 weeks into the first cohort of La Sinvergüenza Symposium, and there's already been massive results. I am so excited to be sharing this space with these ladies. So if you want in, definitely get on the wait list, and I will see y'all next week. If you like what you heard, be sure to hit the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes are released. Join me every week to hear me talk about orgasms, STIs, birth control, and all the other cochinadas your abuela didn't tell you about. But that's not all. We'll also discuss machismo, la tía metiche, and sexual stories from other Latinas just like you. And if you're ready to start spicing up your sex life tonight, then be sure to download my free ebook, Spice It Up con la Sex Coach. You'll find the link to download it in the show notes. Do you have an idea for a podcast episode? Send me a text at 669-200-9269 and tell me all about it. And finally, let's keep in touch. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Sex in Spanglish. Be sure to follow me and let me know you heard this episode. Espero verte pronto.